you feeling stifled, worn out, or just bored with your 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 job? I want you to know that you're not alone. I was there too, till I started asking and wondering if there was another way to live and work where I could actually be more of me. In this episode, I bring to you real conversations with real people who have chosen to step out of their 9 to 5 employment and create a life for themselves that is more in line with their inner rhythm. Good morning, Amit.
Good morning, Ramya.
Thank you for agreeing to be part of this conversation series. Your journey is so fascinating that I actually, and you know this, I have a personal vested interest in knowing some aspects of your journey, and I believe it's going to be a great contribution. And I know you, but let's take you back. Let's take you back to the first time, your first job straight out of college. What was the organization you joined? What was your job profile? What was your work life as? And then we'll take it from there.
Sure. To begin with, thank you, Ramya, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to meet you again. And I'll be happy to share my journey with you. You know some part of it and some more we will discover. So way back in 95, like everybody else, I did engineering and electronics. And like everybody else, I was looking for a job in MNC. So I got a job in a very lovely multinational called as ST Microelectronics in 1995. And I joined as an R&D engineer, and I spent many years of my life doing designing circuit design, chip design, really high-end R&D work. So that happened in 1995, and I ended up spending 20 years of my life in that company.
Lovely. So how did you move from R&D to your other role within the same organization? How did that happen?
Yeah, so around 14 years into R&D, from designing circuits to managing people, and as happens in other organizations, you grow up, your team size grows, you become a manager, you manage people. So I realized I was managing people and dynamics more than the technology that I was used to manage in the past. And with the help of my HR, they told me that you seem to have talent with people and organization dynamics. How about picking a career shift? So my organization was very, and I had a lot of interest in people aspects. And as a manager, I would coach my team, but and as a manager, I would also be a trainer and coach facilitator for my organization. The domain started getting interesting. I didn't know much about it theoretically, but application-wise, it was very interesting. And there came a time where I had the possibility to make a switch. And I would say my organization, especially my HR and my boss at that time, were both bold and supportive. Bold because they allowed me to take that risk, and supportive, but saying that, if it doesn't work, come back.
Wow.
So it was a very safe space to venture into something very, very new at that time.
That's so nice, Amit. And I want to, spend some more time on that path and that transition because, because I'm a career coach, I come across a lot of people actually who have been in a technical path, in a technical line. And you actually liked what you were doing. You liked the R&D. Yeah. And so it was from one love to another love that you discovered, and which was about, coaching people. I've come across people who even don't like what they're doing and they want to move into a behavioral path. They want to move into something else. And they're so worried and so anxious about it because, their credentials, their qualifications, whatever they have as data outside in the organization, outside in the industry, and inside within them is all in this field, in the engineering field. So, what do you have to say in terms of fears, doubts? And I'm not sure if you went through any fears and doubts because you did also have this go back option. But if you want to reflect on that a bit.
Let me share with you about the fears and doubts. When I did this move, it was 2009, peak of recession. Layoffs had become normal in India, and my friend said, "You'll be the first one to be laid off if something goes wrong."
This friend was inside the organization?
Inside the organization.
Okay.
So yeah, that was there. But I think I also have learned that if you're not happy and satisfied in what you're doing, no matter what's your pedigree, no matter what's your experience, what's the point? What's the point of sticking on to something which is known? And so if it's known, you know it very well, but where's the challenge and where's the learning?
So did you hit that plateau in engineering, in the technical field, or had your job already transitioned into now you're managing people? So you're not really doing the engineering stuff anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened. I'm still an engineer at heart. I actually look around for problems to solve. So
And would you still get excited by circuit design and
there is still a little bit of coding I do even in my normal work. When I have to automate files and do stuff, I try to do as much as automation as possible. So, my family tells me you're still an engineer at heart. So yes, the role did transition into management, which wasn't really core engineering. So hence, in that sense, it had reached up where there was not, and I was feeling not enough learning was happening for me.
yeah.
What can I do more? What can I do different? And I wasn't willing to settle for comfort and say, okay, now I'm in a pushy, job, safe job, and I can continue. So there was in Hindi we say there's a kida. There's a kida that goes on within. That even there's no point staying in. There is comfort, but there's no growth. There's no learning.
Wow. There are three threads I want to pick up from that and explore, and we'll do them all one by one. The first thing I love about your journey, and I also think it's a great example, is that sometimes, we have almost this need, and I don't know why we believe that when we have to move from A to B, we have to make A wrong, and we have to prove and justify that, no, I don't like this and this, and therefore I chose this, like almost in terms of proving to people outside and inside. And so I love this example. At heart, you're still an engineer, you still like circuit design, and so what? You also like behavioral science, you also like coaching. This is a new interest that grew, which you didn't have access to now. And you followed this without needing to make engineering into the villain. So I really want to showcase that.
Your career is not doesn't necessarily need to be monogamous.
Yes.
You can have multiple rounds.
I love I'm going to borrow that word actually, is your career doesn't have to be monogamous. Lovely. Thank you. The second thing that I really like about your journey is, in the role of a manager, where you started feeling a little plateaued and a little, it's comfortable, it's cushy, but it's not the intellectual aha of the R&D and the design. And there's a new intellectual germ that's growing in your head, which is around behavioral science, which is a whole new field. And, choosing that emergent idea and recognizing that the run-of-the-mill management, the comfort zone, was not something where you were willing to settle. So that takes courage. So
that takes courage, and it also, now I'm thinking that also needs a lot of belief in self. I don't know where that came from. When I look back now, there's nothing more than I had. I had the belief that whatever happens, I will be able to make it work. And I think though I had no formal education in HR, no formal education in OD and coaching, but somehow there was a belief that I'll make it work. I think that belief comes from a thinking of abundance, that there's a lot in this world for all of us. I think what happened.
Let's dig on that. Yeah. You say it, I believe it on good days. On bad days, I doubt it. And I truly believe that belief in self is really the pillar. And anything that you consciously did, or were there people around you who helped you nurture this belief in self?
I think the environment of the company I grew up in, I say use the word grew up because I actually grew up in that company. I joined as a 21, 22-year-old young man, left at a middle-aged man. So I actually grew up there. And the environment was actually very congenial and to growth. It's very learning-oriented organization. So I think that helped a lot.
Well, that's something to say about company culture, actually, right? So just like sometimes our parents or our upbringing can contribute or take away from self-belief, can go either way. And the same about a company culture, especially your first job,
Yeah.
right? The first job would really matter. In fact, that's what the research shows also. So
Yeah.
that's nice that you recognize that. And what about the abundance mindset? Again, I know right now, let's say 100 people watch this interview. There would probably be 10 who say, yes, abundance mindset. We've heard of it. Out of that, there'll be 10% who say, we truly believe in it. The rest of the world is playing this rhetoric in the media, everywhere in conversations. There's not enough. Come here, grab, compete. Early bird catches the worm. You have to be rat race. You have to be top of the ace. How is it, A, that these things didn't plague you? B, if they did, how did you switch back into the abundance mindset?
I truly believe there is a lot for all of us.
Bachpan se?
I guess so.
Wow.
No, I don't want to go
now
there.
I can't even ask you for a cheat sheet on how the rest of us can develop it.
But I mean, it really has to be, okay, let me put it this very philosophically. If we use the Indian philosophical mindset, which says we are one with the universe, and there's no divide really. I think this divide and this non-abundance mindset comes from this very Western notion of I am different and the world is different, and I have to self-protect.
I have
to self-protect.
Self-protect.
And if we
okay, nice. So let's go slowly with this. So you're saying the need to self-protect itself is a barrier from an abundance mindset, right?
Absolutely.
Because once we've gone into self-protection, and this self-protection is huge. Don't you see a lot of products literally developed for self-protection?
Yeah. The current consumeristic capitalistic world is around self-protection, and it actually takes away from us the belief that there is much more beyond me. And the power also, somehow, if I am holding on to very tightly, this I'm also assuming a lot of power within self to hold on to.
Let's talk a little more about that, Amit, because power is like one of those most double-edged, controversial, multifaceted concepts, right? And I want to see how you're connecting power with abundance.
Yeah, so let me put it this way. It's also coming to me as I speak to you. See, if you believe that there is limited and I need to grab it and I need to protect and I need to hold myself, there's almost an unsaid implicit power that you believe in yourself that I can do all of that. I can actually do all of that. Whereas the power is much more power way outside, beyond you. What happens to you and the world around you is really not in your control. If nothing, COVID has taught us this. The power is real out there.
I was just going to say that, right? COVID should have taught us that no matter how much we're trying to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe and secure, life can just tuck.
You have freaking no control on what's going to happen into your life. Whatever detailed planning and Excel sheets you may hold for your self and life and your financial planning, what may hit you is much bigger and much beyond you. So the power really is outside than within you to micromanage your life.
So but I'm going to grant this to you, Amit, as your mindset, because again, with the whole uncertainty and the things that happened with COVID, some people like you have, interpreted it as the power is outside of us. So let's not stay in this illusion that we can actually, do anything to keep ourselves safe, or we even need to. And I'm sure you were going there before I asked you this. But a lot of others have actually just tightened that need for security, and they're feeling even more afraid and even more, I need to grab, I need to keep, I need to, hold on to what I already have. So I guess at that point, it's just a mindset, right?
Yeah, and then that's what takes you away from abundance mindset.
Yeah, and it can't go with the abundance mindset.
It may sound very fatalistic when I say this, ki jo hona hoga hoga, but if you remove the fatalism out of that, but there is also some element of truth to it, no? There's only so much you can do. So if, hence, I can't really micromanage and govern my life. I can plan and then go with the flow and keep that belief that there is a lot of power outside. The universe and world has so much more to offer to us, if only we are willing to receive.
Lovely. Let me frame that again. Yeah. So, trust go with the flow. And the world has so much to offer to us if only we are willing to receive. And before that, if only we open up to it, which is what you did in this transition, right? So you were a manager and you would have been at a pretty senior level by then, right? You would have like, yeah, you've proved yourself, you like the company likes you, very comfortable.
I had my cabin. I had my cabin. So.
You had your cabin, yeah. You had your power, or the illusion of power, right? You're the boss. And in that state, you still chose to look at the world as bigger, more abundant, to trust it, to open up, and therefore you could then receive into this.
I would also add, and as you picked up very early on, there's also a layer of safety that I was operating on. I was in the same company. I had knew the people, the relationships mattered. So it was easier for me to do. And if I fast forward, and I know you want me to fast forward to the next transition, then all of that was taken away. And then it was not so easy.
Let's dive into that. So, yeah.
So 6 years, I lived the role of an internal OD consultant and a coach. It was some phenomenal quality work that I did in my company. The company was very open to look at change and transformation. And we looked at cultural transformation, leadership transformation, organization transformation, and some really good quality work happened. And then I reached a place where I said, what more can I do here? Ho gaya. Right. So I need to now, I mean, a certain sense of belief also started coming in among my skills and competence that I think this needs a larger outlet and larger expression. So I decided to move out.
Let me underline that. Larger outlet and larger expression.
Yeah.
So yeah, two very core needs. Now, what you have, your gifts to come out.
Yeah. And that's when your true potential is really coming out and tested, no?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember a very good friend of mine, it's very desi North Indian friend. He said, the challenge is till now you've been cooking chicken at home and everybody's liking it. So when you go out, you have to cook chicken and sell it. That's going to be real test.
Nice. I love that analogy.
So that whatever you're doing is doing in the organization, you have a captive audience. Now you're going to go out and generate revenue out of that. And would people be willing to pay for that?
I so get that, because that's exactly what happened to me when I was designing and teaching courses only within IIM Bangalore. I was cooking chicken at home. Everyone knew me. And now I'm actually going out every day and selling the chicken and everything else that I'm cooking.
So that happened.
I'm a veg, by the way, but I do cook chicken for my dog. But
yeah, there you go.
There I go. So, Amit, this larger outlet, larger potential, that's clearly something that's lighting you up, that's pulling you, right? And with that, now there is the safety that you had last time, the safety net, the regular income, people know you. So what is the tension that you felt at that stage internally? How easy was it to let go of that safety net? Because it's an absolute let go now, financial.
I was still, so what happened is I had a two-step process here. I moved and joined a startup mid-sized company. So it was still joining a company, but yeah, I was letting go of all the safety in terms of relational capital, in terms of the salary that I was, status, the salary that I was earning. I had come down on the salary, but since the opportunity.
So this new startup still had a fixed salary, but it was lower.
It was more riskier, and I did my due diligence and found out it's going to be a very risky proposition. So I went there and it didn't work. Very soon, in a few months, it didn't work. And that was the time then I had to make a call. What now?
How did you feel then? Let's talk about this, because a lot of things that we do will not work. And many times it can feel like the end of the world. But I mean, in our brains, we know it isn't, but how do you navigate around those feelings? And
it was terrible. It was a terrible, terrible time in my life. I had moved my families. We had moved cities. So everything had changed. The social structure and the relational structure didn't exist anymore. And then this job didn't work. So it's like professional structure doesn't work now. So what do you do? So
did you go into any form of blaming, like?
I think
did others blame you? Because sometimes
I must acknowledge the support that I got from family was phenomenal.
Wonderful.
My wife was always there, says, whatever you do, we'll do together and we'll deal with it. I think that makes the hell lot of a difference.
Yeah, because the last thing you want at that stage is where, if you're doubting, did I do a mistake or a wrong move or jeopardize something?
Yeah, and the worst is when you people around you blame, oh, why did you, and why you shouldn't
Or
have.
we told you so, because there have always been people who had told you so.
Yeah. So there were people who were luckily outside my first circle. We told you so, and go back and all of that.
How did you deal with that?
I think the inherent resilience played in, and there was a lot of coping mechanism that happened. So the couple of things happened I would like to share. So I always tell people that I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't choose to be an entrepreneur. While the shift into behavioral sciences and coaching, I have to go out. There's only so much you can do while being in an organization. But that move, that timing wasn't planned through yet, neither professionally, nor pedigree-wise, nor even financially. So just at a snap of finger, it happened. Though I had an option to go back to a job. And when this job didn't work, people said, okay, look for a next job. But something within me told me, hey, you moved cities, you've taken such big risks, and you can't let go of this opportunity to go back to a job now. So if you're meant to be on your own, this is the time. Everything is been designed for you, if without your conscious agreement, for you to start this journey on your own, break the 9-to-5 barrier, as your story, your series is about, and venture and really sell your chicken now.
Wow.
So that's what happened. So two things happened. One,
and you've never been in sales before, and
yeah, that's an interesting one. My LinkedIn network was like, and I came from an R&D industry, so didn't know anybody in the industry as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was almost not almost, it was start from scratch. So two things happened, and very clearly I want to talk about both these things. One is that there was an internal turmoil that happened, and the image, also the coping mechanism kicked in. That the fighter in me said, I have to make it happen. So both of them are significant because the fighter helped me cope, but there was an inner world that was getting really challenged, and the coping is not good enough to help. So a lot of work hence needed to be done at an internal space also for me to be ready to be in that new space.
Tell us about, to whatever extent you're comfortable, some of the internal work that you did. And I must give it to you. I love the distinction you've made between A, the internal work and the outer work, and B, between coping and, let's say, thriving or actually dealing with it, right? Because it's so true. And I'm just realizing with the external world, we can cope. But when it's inside of us, I don't want my life to just be coping with me. Like, I want more from life, right?
Yeah.
Like, my life can't be a whole story of Ramya coping with Ramya, and all the turmoil inside Ramya. I want to heal, I want to grow, I want to cleanse, I want to thrive, I want to discover. So I love that, so tell us whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Sure. See, the outside world wants you to cope and move on.
Yeah.
Move on is
and
the most...
in many dimensions, I think that's what I'm doing. I'm just coping with the outside world, the weather, the stakeholders, the judgments, the people, right?
Yeah. So in my case, coping is getting to work, establishing yourself as an independent consultant, building your company, networking, reaching out, partnering, and making sure you're earning enough because you got a family to run. So that's
have the breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the table, something in the bank, whatever, insurance.
Yeah. So that's what coping is. But if we don't look at what's happening within us, this coping won't last. And I soon realized in a couple of years that there was still a lot of inner turmoil happening. And there were many unanswered questions that I had not answered for myself. Only when I was doing my own personal work with my therapist and coach, I got those spaces to talk about it and deal with them. Yeah, there is a lot I went through. I coped through it, but there is a lot healing that needs to be done at an inner level. Only when that healing happens, I am more available to the outside.
That's so true. Let me repeat, underline and bold that again. Only when that inner healing happens am I available to the outside.
Yeah.
I could underline that 6 times. Yeah, because I'm sort of in some ways always there. The outside can see me, but I'm not available as who I am unless I heal from inside. So Amit, I know inner healing is an ongoing journey, lots of things. But would there be maybe one example of something that you could give us, which you worked through and you've healed to an extent that now you can look back and look at it as an example of inner healing? Because for many people, and I know this because I talk to many people, the whole idea of inner healing or inner journey is actually an alien concept. They haven't even thought that there could be anything inside to heal. It's so
I think one significant example for me, and I'll also tell you the implication of that if the healing is not done.
Yeah, that would be great.
So that this you said, then when I took this job and it didn't work and it failed, and you said, how did it feel like the failure?
Yeah.
So I said, I quickly jumped to coping. So I think the inner healing was around really acknowledging the failure.
Wow.
And dealing with the sadness that comes with it. Oh, it didn't work.
Courage, right?
And it takes a lot of courage to just stay with that process and deal with it. Say, yeah, it didn't work, and acknowledge it and say, and then move to then it's okay. It's okay, it didn't work. It's okay, it failed. It's okay, I'm sad about it. And now I can heal myself to move on. And if that acknowledgement also, most of the time we don't even acknowledge it.
Yes.
There's so much rush to move on that there's not enough time and space created to acknowledge. I think to me, that's a significant process in healing.
Wow.
Staying put, going slow, just acknowledging and even verbalizing the process and verbalizing the emotions that you feel within, checking what's happening with you in your body. And we have a mind-body connect, as you know very well. So being congruent with all of that.
Wow.
And if you don't do that, the implication I tell you is coming back to the abundant mindset. The world has to offer. Are you willing to receive it? So if you're not dealt with that inner thing, you're not even willing to receive that. So your ability to receive also get restricted because your energies are blocked within you.
Wow. I love that. So tell me if I've got this right. So it's like, the world outside gives you one blow, one failure, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're sort of just trying to avoid it or just put the blame somewhere else or denial or not dealing with it, and you go out again, when you're going out, you're actually not, like in your words, available to all the opportunities. And there might be a ton of, let's say, similar opportunities. For whatever reason, now you don't look at it anymore because instead of accepting the failure, all you're done was a quick shortcut in the brain saying, ye bakwas hai, or that doesn't work. Some form of external coping that then makes me feel okay. And now, because of that, half your future pathway is actually blocked and cut off. Yeah. But instead, if you come in, accept, do the inner work, and when you go out, you again have all these open and you can look at it fresh.
Yeah, and it's not so simple in terms of, materialistically, I'm able to see opportunities or not. I'm going beyond into metaphysical way of really there's energy out there. And are you willing to receive that? And your ability to receive goes more and more up the more you have done this work. Otherwise, I remember when in the initial phases of my consulting work, if I'm going into a new client meeting, and I could map it up. I actually documented and with the anecdotal incidents of my own journey, any meeting that I'm going with, I have to get this project. This is a key client, it's a big logo. It has to happen. Trust you, it won't happen.
Wow. Tell us more about this, Amit, because I think everybody resonates and relates with this.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. And tell us how how you understood this in terms of the energy dynamics and the mindset dynamics.
The meeting in which I went with the mindset of, let's see what happens. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. If it's meant for me, it will happen. Those were the ones in which I was also very available to the conversation. And in our profession, and that in consulting and coaching, you are the instrument of change. Yourself is the instrument of change. So yourself is available fully to the client system. and to talk about really their issues and how do we deal with it. If I go with an agenda, then I have to fix it. So my conversation is always going to get focused into how do I convert it. So am I fully available? No.
Wow, Amit, this is so profound. And I know it's anecdotal. You've given us one example, but I can think of so many in my own life. And the one that's popping up the most is something that I always tell as a joke, but I think it's following the same pattern that you said. So there was a time when I was desperate to have a child and I was not getting pregnant. Okay. I used to walk in the park, look at, I was in London there, strollers, and every child, I was like, I want a baby. I was like obsessed, to the power of obsessed. And then my sister had a baby and I went to meet her and I spent some time with her baby and it was so much work and it was so, I was like, you know what? I don't want a baby. Like, it's not just the, cute thing in the pram. And I said, I don't want a baby. And I became very peaceful. And she was in New York and I flew back. I came back to London and I got pregnant.
There you go.
And I was like, what is this? Is the universe making jokes with me that the day, like literally a month after I said, you know what, I don't think I really want a baby, then I get pregnant. What is that? Something that relaxes in our own energy as what I'm picking up from you.
Actually,
that desperateness goes off.
There's a constriction that actually happens at an energy level. I want it. If you really look at your body language, there's always there's a shrinking happening. And when you say, okay, it's okay, it's a let go happens. So you're more available.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's the receiving you're talking about, right?
That's the receiving I'm talking about. Now you're more available to receive.
Wow.
And I remember very lovely quote somebody had quoted me, and which made a profound impact on me. What you are badly seeking out for is also equally badly seeking out for you.
But you have to be open and available to receive it.
Yeah. So this may sound not so practical, not so cognitive. That's why I said it's at a very metaphysical energy level. That's how, in my experience, it works.
But for me, it is practical, Amit, because it shows this is where the results come.
Yeah, true.
So I have been blamed a lot, like from my mother to lots of my friends, that Ramya, be practical, Ramya, be practical. So one day I went and looked up the definition of practical. Now I have a reply to everyone. I was like, practical is what shows results. If opening up and receiving is the one that shows results, I think it's the most practical thing.
Yeah. It does go against the conventional wisdom that is taught to us.
Yeah. And I guess that's again coming from that fight, survive, grab as fast as possible.
Again, the mindset is not, abundant there.
It's that switch, right?
That's the switch.
Thank you. Yes, I love the way everything is actually going back to that core of an abundance mindset.
Yeah.
And I truly wish there was some way to make that switch. I still don't know how to, but just knowing that if and when you can make it, because at this point, I can make it more in a temporary way. There is a possibility that opens up, which is not available without that abundance mindset. Just that knowledge itself, I think, is precious.
Yeah. And I think while I'm saying that, it's not that I don't go through my cycles. There are days in which I say, oh God, what am I doing? Is it the right thing to do? And then there are days in which, everything looks lovely. So the work that I do today, and I think there's a lot, and that there's a work that
tell us more about that.
So I'm an OD consultant, so I work with organizations helping them manage change and do transformation. But there's also a lot of work that we do on working with individuals. Having gone through this journey, me and my partner, we both have a similar journey. And my partner Sanjay, we had similar journeys, and we realized, why not create something for people who will help them support in this journey. So we came together 4 years ago and put our hearts together. I'm saying not the minds, the hearts together, to create this space for people, to help them and make this transition. And this transition is not only about breaking out from corporate. The transition is really about breaking out from this constricted life to a life which is full, which makes you come alive. We call it
like a reinvention of self. right?
It's like a reinvention of self, a life of choice. Sanjay says it very well. There are two lives, a life which has been given to you, and the second life is life which you choose for yourself. So we're saying creating a life of choice, purpose, and meaning, and which makes you come alive fully and helps you get in touch with true joy.
Absolutely. And I love the metaphor that you use, which is that of birthing in the
Yeah.
Take Two program, right?
Yeah.
So you have participants go through this pregnancy and then they birth something.
Yeah.
And I remember, some people were birthing like a new version of themselves. For some, it's a job. For some, it was an art or a hobby, and different versions, different ways in which they can birth this.
It is indeed a new birth, a life which is a new life, a life which you create, a life of your own choice and purpose. So in this work, and this is something that we were working with. So this program, as you know, is called Take Two, and we've been doing it for the last 4 years now. And with so many participants and so many stories, and you know how much time we spend with every participant, hours and hours and hours to listen to the stories. One truth that we got in touch with, and which is, to me, if I connect it back with this abundance mindset, is we seem to have been fed in our minds that life needs to be comfortable. Life needs to be predictable. Life needs to be hence happy. So there is this pursuit of happiness.
Comfortable, predictable, and therefore happy, right? The happiness being conditional on comfort and predictability. And so like COVID has shown us, neither of those actually needs to be true. And taking the same formula into, because I think this formula is very relevant to the beyond 9 to 5 experience also, which is like, just if someone's looking at stepping out of their corporate role and work. So what 3 points of advice, and I know that you'll have more than 3 and we could go on and on, but what would be your top 3?
I will speak from my heart, and I don't know it'll be 3, 1 or 3 or 5. So this thing has been fed into us that life has to be comfortable, life has to be predictable. Hence, that's what a successful life is. And the benchmarks of success are very capitalistic, very materialistic. And benchmark of happiness is also capitalistic and materialistic.
Tell us a little more about that. So benchmarks of success and benchmarks of happiness, and both of them, what we are basically being educated, if I may use that word, is from a capitalistic point of view. So examples.
Who's a successful man or a woman? Somebody who's got a career or a job and a good salary. They're living in their own house, drive good cars, take nice exotic vacations, and then the ladder goes on and on and on and on and on. There's no end to it. And that's the benchmark. So the one truth we came in touch with is that this is a myth. This pursuit of happiness is a myth. And beyond happiness is joy. And that joy comes only when you're able to and ready to accept life as inherently uncertain, inherently unpredictable. And the joy comes by accepting it as a challenge and the thrill of it.
So, the word pursuit itself, and I know there's a movie by this name actually, right? The Pursuit of Happiness.
Yeah.
But pursuit itself means like you can only pursue something that's running away from you, right? And if you want the pursuit to continue, and if your kick and adrenaline is coming from the pursuit and the chase, you actually want, like imagine, dogs playing, like when one dog is chasing the other.
Yeah.
It's fun only when your target is moving away. And it just seems, therefore, like this endless game and endless race, as opposed to, what you're talking about, joy, which is more emergent and it comes from the being. It can come from the doing also, but it's part of the process and not linked to a catch, a find, a destination. Thank you. That's beautiful.
And lovely metaphor for this, of the dogs. The dog, I didn't think of it. The other dog needs to run. Then only there's joy, fun in it. There's no fun otherwise. So there is this moving target all the time. And I know of people who have said, when my earning would be so much, or when my saving would be so much, then I will start living my life.
Yeah.
In a way.
I was so caught in that. I mean, literally, I speak from experience. Literally, I was like, wait a minute, this is never going to end. We better start looking at this in a totally different way than it is.
So there are 2 phases to it, Ramya. One phase is between 20s to 30s. 40s, or maybe these days is 30s, is reaching there. When you've made it, you could go around
At least in
comfortably.
your own eyes, right? First,
In
you want to
your
make it in your own
Yeah,
eyes.
because your own eyes are also conditioned by the benchmarks kept with the society.
Absolutely.
So your
And,
first,
I hit this sort of plateau where no matter what I was achieving outside, in my own eyes, it was never enough.
never enough. Yeah. So that's a different topic. I'm not going there yet.
Yes.
So there
won't go
is
there.
first phase is to reaching there, and that's accelerating and that's thrilling, because you're living up and grown out of wherever you've grown out of, and you're achieving something, and there's accolades all over, and okay, I've reached there. The second phase is the more dangerous phase, where you have to be at it, and the fear start coming in very strongly there on.
And
Now,
what happens if you're not being at it?
if you're not being it, you will lose all that. There is all that you've created, your identity that is socially approved.
Can all crumble.
All that starts crumbling down. So you have to work even more harder to stay there. It's like your cart on an incline. If you don't take it up, it'll go down. So then they have so many people in their 30s and 40s and struggling to keep it up and moving on and moving on and moving on till they reach their 50s and realize, oh my God, was this it?
So what can you give us as, maybe not the entire journey out, but starting points?
The starting point is, there are 2 points. I'll give you 2 continuums. One, the other continuum I gave you already, that life is inherently uncertain, and the fun
and embrace it, accept
it, accept it. And it's a very, 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 very difficult acceptance. So let's park that.
But it brings with it very, very, very huge amounts of freedom, right?
And we move from happiness to joy.
Yeah.
In the Indian context, we move from sukha dukkha to ananda.
Nice.
Yeah, that's where we move.
From the polarities of sukha dukkha to ananda. So ananda doesn't have an opposite, does it?
It's your ananda, true bliss.
Just ananda. Sukha has dukkha, but ananda has nothing. It's just
and
ananda.
Sukha and dukkha are coins, two sides of the same coin. The more you strive for sukha, the more dukkha will continue to follow up with you.
Or fear of dukkha will want you.
That itself is a big dukkha. And on the other side is awareness. I think the first step is really about awareness, that am I truly joyful? Am I really bringing my true potential out? Am I feeling alive truly? Every day I wake up in the morning and it's like, oh my God, there's a drudgery, one more day to do. I have to, listen to my boss, listen to my client, whatever I'm working with, somehow get over it and somehow survive. Is your day somehow surviving, or is it really you feel truly alive and joyful? And that's the first step. If you get in touch with that awareness, most often than not, people have numbed that faculty to get in touch with that am I truly alive and joyful or not?
I like that numbing and word actually, because it reminds me of what you talked about with regard to coping as well, right? A lot of times we numb ourselves in order to cope, and then the numbness stays on and becomes a part of life. And
very interestingly, I'll tell you about this program that we do. And when we have many people there who are fence sitters, who have already gotten a taste of, this is not really it, and I need to do something else. And when they sign up for us, so many times it has happened that next day they call out and something happens to them. I don't think I'm ready for it. I don't think I'll do it now. And then they numb it back again and say, go back to that safe place.
That's the comfort zone.
That's the comfort zone.
I've seen this with me also. With anytime I'm signing up for any kind of personal development or anything that has a huge possibility for expansiveness, there's a part of me that's resisting and saying, scary, I don't want to expand so much. I don't want to grow so much. Let's just be in the safe and familiar. But thank you so much, Amit. And I'm just sort of taking 3 A's away from this conversation that we've had. Ananda as indicators, and Ananda, awareness, and aliveness. And that is such a gift, and just it helps me remember if I put it into something like this. But thank you so much for this conversation, and It's been a joy and delight, absolute delight. And we're going to put more details about you, the work you do, as well as the Take Two program on the comments below this, so people can seek you out and find you out for more. And thank you for being a role model, being an inspiration, and, taking the courageous and less strong path, because in doing that, your experiments become like the case studies and life books that other people can learn from. So thank you for that contribution.
Thank you, Ramya, for giving this space. And I really loved this conversation. It was truly from heart. As I told you, I'm not going to come prepared. Let's talk from heart. And I really enjoyed just speaking from that space. So, and trust the academician in you to create a frame of 3 A's. I love that.
Thank you so much.
All right, then.
Bye-bye. Have a lovely day with Ananda, awareness, and aliveness.
Yes.
Bye-bye. If you are someone who's looking to craft your life and work in a way that is more in line with your inner rhythm, then do visit my website, www.craftingourlives.com. You'll find it in the description, because I have a host of resources put together for you. And this is based on 20 years of my own research and work with people as a coach in this area. I also have a free newsletter. So your starting points should be to sign up for my newsletter, subscribe to this channel to stay updated for further videos, and to go on to the edX site and look for my free MOOC course there titled Crafting Realities, Work, Happiness and Meaning. And then reach out to me if you need further assistance. I also offer private coaching, as well as I run group coaching sessions, and I also conduct residential retreats. And you can find all that information on my website or in the newsletter as and when we announce it.